Quickly after leaving the church, I was very bitter and angry. I felt alone and isolated, and I had a new problem: a complete loss of my community and the people I had known for most of my life. Hi, I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon church, and this is what I did after leaving.
And I'm Di Beals. I'm a pastor at Venture Church in Washington. I'm your friend, and as always, I'm along to hear your story.
All right, great. So for those of you who are faithful listeners, I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me and, talking about the podcast with me. I'm a real relational person, so I always love having these offline conversations with people about the podcast. I have felt that it is really important to hop back into the story. So for those of you who are following along, we started at the faith crisis. We moved through to a lot of my wrestlings with wrestlings. Is that a word, Di?
Sure.
Wrestling?
Yeah. Multiple wrestlings. Yes.
Yeah. Multiple wrestlings. I'm a wrestler. Never heard that term. But we talked about me wrestling with leaving and a lot of these anti-Christian feelings that I had. And I wanted to kind of jump back in to this story and just continue to tell it.
Yeah, because you left us on a cliffhanger. So
I did.
Help us out here.
Yeah, so we are back on. And I think it's important to create some context for what Mormon community looks like. So we're talking about community today. In the Mormon church, for me, I grew up in Western Washington, and it's a really small group of people. So you may not have attended church with if you change from ward to ward, you are going to know people, or from area to area. It's just a really small, tight-knit community. And so I remember every ward where me and my wife moved when we were newlywed, she's like, "Who do you know here?" I'm like, "I know like 50% of these people, even though I never lived in this community." Like,
Why,
I know that
big
guy.
Regional events or something?
It would be like, I know that person because I know their brother, or I know their parents, or I went on a youth trek with them, or there's some like affiliation, like small affiliation where I knew like, oh, this would be like my type of person, right?
Okay.
And so there's also this thing called home teaching. Now they call it ministering. Have you ever heard of this, Di? Home teaching? Each family is assigned another family in the church. And that is your family to like, you're assigned it. You don't pick them. That's your family to like make sure that if they have a need, that you're there to fulfill that need. So yeah.
Is it regulated somehow?
It's really great in theory. The problem is no one does it. But it's really great. Like it's a really cool system. I remember when I got into Elders Quorum, I remember looking at the statistics and I'm like, I'm the only one who does this. It's very like
good job doing your homework.
Yeah, home teaching. Now they call it ministering. Okay, ministering. And then we used to have 3-hour church. When the church was more true, we had 3-hour church, and where you would sit with people. I mean, this was probably until 2018, 19, 20. Correct me if I'm wrong, people. But for a long time, we had 3-hour church where when you're around people that much, you get to know them and you get to know their family. And so I would say that the Mormon community is pretty strong. Like if you were in a ward, there's a lot of, people that you establish relationships with. Also, everyone serves in the ward. So everyone has a job that you are in these serving capacities and trying to do things. And so you develop friendships with people within your ward. And I think one of the saddest things is I kind of evaluate people who leave the church. They say, I don't agree with the church at all. I don't agree with the theology, but I actually miss a lot of the community elements that exist within the church.
Yeah.
And they have a really hard time separating out, like, can I be friends with these people? Can I?
Or can those
Is
friends be friends with you?
Yeah, will they accept me and my non-believing life? And that's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are like, "Oh, you don't believe anymore? You're going to be a cancer to me and my family." And sometimes they're like, "I don't know, I mean," and there can be a mix within that. And I think for me, I really cut off a lot of communication that wasn't mandatory with the church. Like, I didn't cut off communication with my family, even though a lot of them were involved in the church. But anyone else from my ward, I was just like, man, I don't even have the capacity to deal with you at all. And I think it made me really lonely. I mean, all of these people that I've talked with throughout my life, I'm just like, nope. I have no interaction with you.
And that's such a drastic turning point too. It wasn't like you slowly weaned off. You just cut it off.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point. Is I just said 1 week I'm here and 1 week I'm not. And there were a lot of relationships within that. My electrician that I had had for 1,000,000 years as Mormon, I'm like, can I still call this guy? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I can even, what does that look like? And so I put this question out there. Are ex-Mormons alone? And I think that's an important question to ask. I definitely felt very lonely after leaving the church and confused on what would happen, with these relationships that I had. And so we're going to talk about some fun stories while I was after I left the church. I found myself in a Christian church. I didn't really want to be there at all. It was your church.
Yep.
I found myself in a Christian church, and it was kind of like the box checking from the Mormon church found its way over to the Christian church. I was like, I don't want to be here, but I'll get my kids here because my wife wanted to come. So I dropped my kids off. I dropped my wife off. She goes over, to church. And then I would book it out the door and go do something else while church was happening. Okay. And that was kind of my strategy was get in, make sure people's needs are met. And then I'm going to go out in the hallway, or not in the hallway. I was going to go outside. I was going to go out to the car. I was going to do something that didn't involve being in a church.
You know that you're not the only one who does that, right? Or did that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Hey, we just figure if somebody's on the property, that's a good start.
That's the gateway. So in one of my attempts to leave, in one of my attempts to just say, I don't want to be here, I ran into the happiest, smiliest, overly friendly person.
Yep.
Which I'm telling you, if you don't want anything to do with Christianity, you don't want to run into these people. Okay. So I ran into this guy. Okay. This is Sean King. Even in this picture, he just looks way too happy. Okay. He's happy. He's full of joy.
It's legit though.
He is a happy person. So anyways, I run into this guy in the hallway and he's like, hey, really excited. Hey, how's it going? And I'm like, hey, what's up? And he's like, I don't know you, like really, that person, real bubbly and throwing it all out there. And I'm like, dude, like, this is a lot for me. Like, it's a lot for me to drop off my kids, my wife. This is a lot. Okay. And he's like, I don't know you. And I said, hey, listen, man, I don't want to be here. Okay.
Oh, I didn't know you led with that.
I just dropped off my kids and my wife. They like it here. I'm just along for the ride. Okay. He's like, oh, okay, well, it's still nice to meet you. I was like, okay, cool. That's good enough. No guilt, no shame. He just threw it out there. It's still nice to meet
Shoot,
you.
that's like a hard stiff arm right there.
Yeah, I was not feeling it, Di. I mean, this is the story. And I remember like, okay, now I'm walking outside and I'm doing my own thing, and I'm not involved in this. I got to keep an eye on the time that I'm here to pick up my kids so that they at least think I went to church. And you know, and so I go out next weekend. My wife's like, hey, I signed us up for a hike. I'm like, I don't hike, but okay, we'll go for a hike. She's like, yeah, church people are going to be there. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I already said I'm going. So we go, and Sean is there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this guy that I just kind of told off, like, hey, I don't want anything to do with you guys. So he's there. And so we walk on this hike, and Sean says everything about his whole life story, on that walk, about how he had, been really involved. He got fired from his job for different things that happened. He's just like super transparent guy, like really open about his life and where things had gone. And I'm just like, oh, I actually kind of like this person. Like this, it was the first kind of twist and turn where I was like, this is a cool guy who's being really open about his life.
It's like
and
refreshing, right? Especially where you would come from with all the secretive stuff.
Yeah, where it's like really pure, like everyone's so holy and right, and my bishop's a good man, and like everything's so pure. And this guy's just like telling me like his story about like, some pretty heavy stuff. And I'm like, oh, like I actually like the. And so I started saying, yeah, I was Mormon, and now I don't know what we're doing. We're doing something. I'm taking my family to church. And so that was the first kind of twist in my story. But hold on, there's still some negative. Di, did you know that I asked my wife to never have anyone from your church ever come to our house? Did you know this happened?
No.
Yeah, I have.
You needed a safe zone of some sort.
Yeah, I just said, hey, you can do your own thing on Sunday morning. Don't ever let anyone come to our house.
Okay.
And
That's so unhospitable. It's not like you.
I know. I love people. I like, which is so funny. I had somebody from your church ask me, Kai, you were so angry at that time. You seem like such a nice, like, it's just so weird. And I'm like, yeah, I was pretty pissed off at the time. But anyways, I remember we had just left church, and I was kind of dealing with a lot of like pent up anger. And you guys had a little initiative where you were going out and you were saying, we want to pray over people's houses, over their businesses. Do you remember this movement, Di?
Yep.
Okay. And I'm running because that's how I kind of deal with stress and anxiety. I was running, like physically, like earbuds in, running on the streets. And I pulled over to the side of the road, and I was so annoyed that you guys wanted to come to our house to try to bless our family that I said, do not let anyone from your church come over to our house. Okay.
That's some strong language when you choose the word your church. I'm assuming this was to your wife.
This is to my wife. Yeah.
Her church, not yours.
It was definitely your. Okay.
How did she respond to that?
She just said, okay.
Okay.
And,
she didn't pick that battle.
She let it lie because she knew, she shares a house with me. She knows where I'm at on the religious spectrum. So I think that gives kind of a barometer to where I was. And it took a lot for me to want to be in community again, right? Like it took a lot for me to want to be with religious people and open myself up to relationships within religion. And a lot of
Wait, hold on. That's a trust issue, not an I don't need people issue, correct?
Sure. Yeah, because I looked to find that in other places,
Yeah.
right? Was I was on the board of a not-for-profit. I was involved with that, and we had meetings with a lot of my friends who are great. I was coaching a lot, and so I had a lot of interactions with people in that way. But it's different. It's a different relationship. Going to an event with people and spending time with them, or even coaching, which you spend hundreds of hours with a small group of people.
Mhm.
It's different. It's a
Mhm.
different relationship. And I was very alone during that time. Especially because I had completely cut off contact with the whole Mormon side. My contact with my family was pretty temperamental. And I was just trying to figure out what to do and where I wanted to move with my relationships. And so I think I found myself pretty alone um, for quite a while, and as a very social person. And I just want to say that there is kind of this ex-Mormon idea that you can have all of the same benefits of the Mormon church without being religious at all. And I kind of wanted you to talk about that a little bit. For those of you who don't know, Di is way too humble. Di has a huge church. And it's not maybe her church, it's the Lord's church, but she has been able to have a mega church of thousands and thousands of people. And what benefit do you think that your church serves, like, as far as building community for people? Like, what benefit do you think there is?
Well, we have 3 core values at Venture, and one of them is community. And we like to explain that or define that, I guess would be a better way to say that. As as humans, we all have a need for community, relationship, connection to other people, to be in the life of someone else and for someone else to be in your life. And, some of those needs are met within a family. If somebody is fortunate enough to have family and have those relationships, that could be extended family, it could be a spouse, it could be children, or a combination of those. But we are made for community. And if you take that word and even broaden it a little, we're made to be a blessing even in our communities. So we really focus a lot and emphasize a lot the importance of community. We give regular opportunities for people to choose community and to choose to share their life with other people. There's a lot of disclaimers underneath that because some people have more time than others, et cetera, et cetera. But everybody needs community, and we don't just benefit from it, we benefit by giving community as well. So it's a big thing. And as a church grows, it becomes more difficult. It takes more intentionality. It takes more work to think about how to provide opportunities so that people aren't just a face in a crowd. And that is never something that we want people to feel here at Venture. So we work really hard to know people and to provide opportunities for them to be known as well. So I think for us this year, going into now 2025 soon here, we really are, the word we're saying even more than community is connection. Because, and I think you hit on this, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with people and call it community, whether that's coaching or doing a shared activity, and really not actually know those people or be sharing life together. So connection is even a step deeper. And I think in a post-COVID world, I don't think this, I know this is a fact. In a post-COVID world, the need for relationship is even that much more vital.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you teed up the next slide so well.
Well,
And we don't
great.
we don't collaborate. So this is
No,
really
you like to
cool.
surprise me with all things, and I
I do
don't
like
mind.
to
So
I do like to surprise Di. There uh you talked about community versus connection,
Mhm.
and I think it goes perfectly into this Mormon Stories podcast interview that was done this week, where they're talking about ways to replace community within from an ex-Mormon context, right? So you've left the Mormon church, and there are plenty of great ways to replace that community, right? According to them. And
that's a key word, though. We look for ways to replace the community. But continue.
Yeah, and I think that there are suggestions where, well, you could join a hiking group, you could join a biking group, you could join any group that you want. It doesn't have to be religious. And I'm just kind of like, okay, I did those. Like I'm very social. Like I was a wrestling coach and I was on this not-for-profit thing and I hung out with people but it wasn't the same level of connection. It was community. It was people that I hang out with and people I would joke with and maybe tell, some jokes that I probably wouldn't tell on this podcast. It's those types of interactions, but it wasn't deep, intimate, dude, how are you doing type relationships. It was different than that. And I think it's a little bit, I always think about why is the ex-Mormon community so struggling like so hard? And I think it's because they're trying to replace something that really isn't replaceable like that. Like you can't just say, go hiking with people, and then you're going to feel connected to something bigger than yourself. You're going to feel connected to people in a deep and intimate way. I don't know.
To be fair, though, we have to say this. Just because you do things with religious people doesn't therefore necessarily make it better connection. There's still an intentionality of sharing life, and there are all different levels of community. So a hiking group isn't bad. That can be great for you to have people to do things with so that you're not by yourself. But you can still very much feel alone in a group of people or a crowd of people. And the way that we combat that is we have to find places and relationships that we can share life and be beyond, like you talked about Sean, who right off the bat was telling you deep-seated, stuff he struggled with. He's very honest right off the bat that way. And not everyone is. We're not saying that's more spiritual either. You can be a guarded, careful person, but everybody needs somebody that they share their life with. And I think that I would venture to say sharing what you made for dinner yesterday is not necessarily sharing life either. So there is something about the religious community has an advantage there because you're talking about things that matter maybe for eternity or matter for things greater than just, where are you working and, are your kids driving you crazy? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. It's an easier lead in to talk about important things.
Yeah.
Than just me talking about wrestling with another coach. Me talking about wrestling with another coach is just like, oh yeah, did you see how he blah, 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 blah. Right.
But the great thing is that common ground hopefully gives you opportunity to share about things that matter even more than wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that if the environment is there, and I think a religious context, you look at what you focus on, that might be your family, the most important things that exist, your family, like what's going to happen to you after this life. Are you living in a way that's like pushing you forward and being productive? Like all of these things, it's just an easier lead in to talk about things that are really important. Di, I have two things from this slide before we move on. This does not have to do with community. But Di, did you read the title here? Is religion dying in the U.S.? Di, are you scared?
No. No. But to be honest, I there's not many things that scare me except for spiders. I don't like
Okay.
spiders.
I'm reading the line here, and I'm like, Di, your church has gone from what 500 people to 3,000 in 4 or 5 years. I mean, so I don't think that in the least churched place in the United States, your church has exploded. I don't think you're really worried about if religion is dying in the United States.
No, I think against the backdrop of what appears to be no religion, that's the true religion or true relationship with God shines brighter.
Yeah, because we're talking Seattle area, and if you guys know, you know, no one goes to church there.
No,
Nobody's religious. It is the most atheist agnostic place in the United States, and hey, there you go. I also thought it was funny that you have 3 people on this podcast, on the Mormon Stories podcast. They had Ryan T. Cragen and Jesse M. Smith, all 3 atheist agnostic type people. And they're talking about how it's irrelevant to be in community in a church or not. And I just I think it's funny that these people would say that others would have confirmation bias if they said that church is important and that their study would be influenced by confirmation bias. And yet here they are sharing their own confirmation bias.
And they're in relationship with each other. So
yeah, I guess they have that relationship, but I just think it's very interesting and kind of ironic that that's what they're choosing to do. So I think I wanted to kind of move on to this idea of where my story took me. I guess one shot at the Mormon Stories podcast per episode, I guess. And this is the community that I found myself in, was at Venture Church. And whether I wanted to be there in the beginning or not, I went in with a lot of bias. I thought, man, these people are plastic, fake church people. They aren't people who are real. And what's been interesting for me is that the exact opposite has kind of come out. I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are pretty raw and pretty real. And say, you know, I went to lunch with a guy invited me to lunch. I sat down with him. I said, man, you're a pretty straight-laced dude. This is somebody who went to Venture. I said, you're a pretty straight-laced guy. Like you seem to be living pretty like clean, you know, and something along those lines. Didn't come out like that, you know. And he's like, actually, I used to be a really hardcore drug addict. And if I rolled up my sleeves, I have tattoos all up and down my arms. If I pulled down my collar a little bit, you'd see tattoos all over me. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and we were just talking, and he kind of gave his story of how he was a high functioning, you know, addict and all of these things. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And everyone's kind of has this openness, which I think is pretty cool. I guess if that is their story, you know, they share it. And so I kind of found myself in this mega church atmosphere, which was really interesting for me. And that, I'll tell you, after I got saved, it was a really fun, cool community to be involved in. Like, I had a lot of fun, like
It is a lot of fun. It is.
It's just a lot of fun. Like getting to know people, getting to know their story, being united in a big group of people who are pursuing the same thing and just feeling that energy of that. I think when I chose to stop kind of resisting that, and was saved, spoiler alert, I believe in Jesus. When I got saved, I was like, man, this is such a cool place to go. And then I started developing these relationships and these strong relationships and meeting with people and becoming friends with people. It was a really good experience. I have a funny story though from this. Okay. So they were having a men's conference, and this was like right after I had been saved, like
Yep.
really like right after. I don't want to use Christian speak. Right after I decided to be in a relationship with Jesus, not even going to say saved. Okay. And they had a conference, and I'm like, okay, a bunch of dudes hanging out, like seems like totally right up my alley, you know? So I had an employee who was working for me, and he's like, oh, dude, you're going to a men's conference. Let me tell you something. My dad went to one 20 years ago. He had never smoked before, and he had never drank. And he tried it the first time there, and he hasn't stopped.
There's all kinds of churches out there.
There's all kinds of churches out there. So I'm driving to this church conference, and it's literally like 2 hours away from my house, right? So I'm driving, and it's like I went back to 4th grade, like DARE class, drug abuse resistance education or whatever, however that acronym goes. And I'm like, Kai, you can say no, right?
Oh God.
Like, and I'm going to this conference, and I'm like, I mean, it's taking me back in time, right? To when I was like a kid, and I never drank before. I've never smoked. I never, any of that stuff. And it was funny for me. I show up at this conference, and I'm thinking like, it's going to be this like, whatever. And it's like super spiritual. And it's a really good time for me to connect with all these guys. And I remember driving home and thinking how silly it was that I was going to have to like turn down drugs, at this men's conference. Anyways, it's great.
It's great.
It's just great. Okay. So I wanted to talk about this. So this is the mega church vibe, right, Di? This is the deal that I was, came into a relationship with Jesus in, is like this type of environment, and huge, tons of people coming in and out on a Sunday morning, multiple services, all that stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the Hawaiian vibe. Okay. So I move over here, and then I feel this like kind of a sense of loss again, right? Like I'm not hanging out with you guys. I'm not seeing, all my church family. And there was also another kind of loss, right? It wasn't like faith crisis loss, but it was like, oh, that sucks. Like I'm not going to get to see my buddies that I developed these relationships with. And so now I'm in a small church. It'd probably be a mega church for where I live on Kauai, with 200 people, 200, couple thousand. Okay, it's a big difference.
It is.
And so I'm here on Kauai, and trying out churches, and it's just a lot different. And I think it's important to say, like, if you aren't in an area, you can go to a big church. You can go to a small church, and you can find meaningful relationships within both of them. Mm-hmm. So it's funny. Last night they had a gingerbread building contest. So this is in the Christmas season for you guys who, whoever's listening to this, whenever you're listening to it. And my daughter, the cutest of all cute girls,
she really is,
built this beautiful gingerbread house. It's gorgeous, and she's gorgeous. So I took a picture of her literally last night. We were unprepared though for what a gingerbread house building party looks like in Hawaii. We were blindsided.
Was it at the church? Okay.
People brought power tools.
Oh, wow.
People brought like glow sticks.
Whoa.
There were like, I'm like, what, where did we miss the memo that this is like, I mean,
show off time?
Yeah. Like, and there were prizes, and I was like, oh, they bought like legitimate, games or whatever, fun stuff. Right. And so there was a group of like 100 people who got together, who had a potluck, broke bread together, did this whole thing, which was really fun for us to be involved in this, small local church, 3, 4, 5 minutes from our house, and have my son ran off and was playing with friends. My daughter was playing with friends. Me and my wife got to go around and meet new people. It was just a really cool, fun experience for me in a small church, right? In a church of, like I said, 200 people. And it was just, I think that it's important to say you don't have to go to a mega church.
Right.
You don't have to go to a small church. That's not where you're going to find better community or worse community. It's just, you can go and find your people anywhere. So I wanted to really talk about community. Di, what are your thoughts? Like, what benefit do you think it is to have community for people, just in general?
I mean, the hardest things that I have faced in my life, which we don't have the time to share all of them here, but I have been able to face those because of community. Your people are the ones that you call in the middle of the night because you're running to the hospital or because something crisis oriented happened. Your community are the people you maybe want to do vacation with, or that you want to invite to each other's birthday parties. Community is the people you call when you have something to celebrate. Community is, those are your people that you help if they're struggling and someone's going through an illness or needs help with kids. And I mean, I have all of those experiences myself, and I've been in other people's stories. And so that's how I think that's the best way I can describe it. Who's your middle of the night people if you need them? And you got to invest in those relationships and be invested in to have them in place for when you need them. And I think the best place to find them is in the body of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I it's just a great lead in for people. Like, it's a great,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I want to make a distinction here, though. You don't go to church for just community, right? Like, I want to really draw that line. Like, you go because you're a believer, but or you want to believe, or you have this desire, or you're curious, all of those things. But I do think it's a great social construct. Maybe it's more than that, where people can meet together and have common interests. And I honestly think, like, people like me who are pretty social, people like you who are pretty social, I think we could probably find community in other places and find our people. I think a lot of people aren't maybe that social, aren't like, don't have a lead. And even for me, I felt very alone after leaving the church. And I think that church serves a huge function, a larger function for them. Because I know how big it was for me to be in community.
And this is a huge topic. I mean, we could spend a lot of time here, but one thing that I've learned over the years ago, before we planted Venture, we were on a church staff at another church, my husband and I, and we were leading youth and young adults. And a woman married to one of the pastors on the staff, who had heard that we were leaving to go plant a church, scheduled a time to meet with me. And she was probably late 50s. And she sat me down and she said, I just want to give you a piece of advice. And she and her husband were also on our church staff, but they had been pastors of a church before that, and then had decided to come onto this church staff and be under a pastor. So they had been the lead pastors before and weren't at this point. She said, if I could give you one piece of advice, I would say, don't be friends with anybody in your church, which was one of the most shocking statements that I did not expect to come out of her mouth. And I am very relational. Relationships, that's one of my personal core values. And I have 5 core values. It is one of the top 5. Relationships matter. I need people. And I truly think, I truly believe we are more blessed when we give than when we receive. So I want to be a part of relationships also, because when I give, I feel so like I'm living out purpose and things have meaning in my life. It's not just about everything I can get. Anyway, so I took away from that immediately that she had been hurt by people that she had trusted. And that is a legitimate risk we take when we enter community or we choose to share our life with someone else. We take the risk that we're going to be hurt because people can be mean and people can hurt us intentionally and unintentional. And that's a risk we take, but I would rather take that risk than live my life alone. I don't do lonely well. And I don't think most people do. So I chose to be careful and not just say everything about myself to everybody. And, I took her warning, but I walked it out in a different way. Instead of just not being friends with anybody, I was careful about who I let know the deepest things about me. I'm a pretty open book. I will share my life with a lot of people, but those who really know, the deep parts of me, I mean, that's just common sense for friendship. And so, but my closest friends on the planet Earth are all at Venture. And besides my husband and, my family, my closest friends are all at Venture. And they are the people that I would drop anything for right now. I would get up, put my headphones down, and walk away from this podcast if one of those people needed me. But we need people. So that's a priority.
Yeah. I think even at the basic level, like we are pack animals, right? We need to be in community. And I like that it's a vulnerability to put yourself out there to make friends. Different people have different, levels of that. I can put myself out there. Somebody can tell me I'm a moron and I just kind of take it in stride.
Same.
I'd probably agree with them most of the time. But if their points are valid. But I think a lot of people where's the receipts, dude? But I think a lot of people have a harder time with that. They I may live with one of those people that may have a harder time with putting themselves out there in sharing. And I just think a community of believers where you say, hey, I've already put, something very vulnerable out there that I believe in, this supreme being, I believe in Jesus, that which is something that they're kind of going with to lead in on. Di, I have a funny story.
Okay.
I have a friend. He's a younger guy, real young. Okay. He's probably 18, 19 years old. And he said, hey, Kai, I saw that you guys have the church that you go to, Venture Church, that Di is a pastor at. I saw that you guys have a really active, young adult, I guess is what you would call it. So 18 to 30 group, 18-25.
Yep.
And I don't believe in God at all. Okay.
But I'm looking for a wife.
But he's like, but I can't find anybody. He's like, I'm looking for a wife, somebody to marry. And I just can't find anybody. Can I come to church with you? Just for that. Want nothing to do with religion. Okay.
I'm all about get people on the property.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, dude, here you go. I mean, so Di, you're cool with that. You're fine with that.
I mean, I want to protect our young ladies from predatory behaviors, but yeah, I mean, honestly, there was a period of time years ago, not at Venture, where our car got broken into in our church parking lot 11 times over the course of 5 years. Our personal car. Usually if we left it there overnight. So that's just our bad. But sometimes during church on Sunday morning or during a youth service on a Wednesday night. And the best thing was the day that a kid came to our youth service and he came up to Brandon at the end of the service crying, handed him a wrench and said, this is the tool that I use to break into cars in the parking lot. But now I want to give my life to Jesus. And Brandon's like, awesome. Can I have my wallet back? No, he didn't say that, but that's what he was thinking. Also, you stole every CD I owned at one point, and you stole my dress shoes that were in my car once. Anyway, yes.
Wow.
Still know that young man who's not as young anymore to this day.
Really?
Yeah. So,
That must
hey,
have
he
taken a
came on
lot
the
of
property.
forgiveness on
He came on the
Brandon's part.
property. He felt like, wow, I kind of want to go inside. But he came on the property to steal and went inside and ended up giving his life to Jesus. He actually gave Brandon back the entire, remember the CD cases where you could put every CD you own inside of it like a book? Every CD Brandon owns, he had left in his car one day and it got stolen. But they were all Christian CDs, so they were worthless to the kid that broke into the car. So he was like, I just wanted to give these back to you.
He's like trying to hawk them on like
Yeah, they were worth nothing.
on a Facebook page that probably didn't exist.
No,
at
there
the
was no
time.
Facebook back then.
Yeah, he's
No.
like CDs.
Yeah.
For
He's at
Christian
his high
CDs.
school, like in his
Yeah.
coat, like, look what I got. Oh, it's Petra. Never mind.
Hey, for all you young people out there, like CDs used to have value.
Right.
They used to be like a big
They're
thing.
these thing that play music. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But I think it's important for people to just put it out there that like community is important. I believe that church is a great way for people to be in these relationships, and it's a great lead in for people. You don't have to be alone in this like post-Mormon space. And if that is something that you're looking for,
you also don't have to go to a church and immediately pour out your whole life. You can just start by getting to know people. Like there's an entrance ramp for you.
Oh, I'm going to throw this out there, Di. This is important because Mormons don't really do this. You can try lots of different churches. Like, and I know that's not in the Mormon brand.
You're not assigned to the one that's closest to your house. You can go and try places.
Exactly.
Good point.
This is a small island. I won't give a critical review on my podcast of different churches that I went to, but I've been to 8, 9, 10 churches. I didn't just go to one. I thought, man, this one has a community I'm interested in. This one
you got to find your people.
This aspect, this thing. And that is something I will throw out there. You can go die. Does everyone who comes to your church one time, do they stay?
No. In fact, often when I meet people, I'm just standing at the door meeting people. I will say, if this isn't of course, we want this to be the best fit for everybody, but it's not. So if this is not a good fit for you, we know a lot of churches in the area. Tell me what you're looking for, and I will recommend a few to you. So we're all doing the same work here, and people got to find where they fit best.
Yeah, definitely. And so that is a really big thing. If you're like, oh, I would feel bad going to a church one week and then never going back there. It's like, no,
you're not committing your life once you step in the door. You got to find your right people. Which also, I want to go back to, you mentioned the hiking and biking groups. I just want to bring a little balance to that statement. Like, I lead hiking groups here at Venture, and it is, sometimes those hikes that we do are like 20 miles. So we're spending 20 hours together driving there and on the trail for 12 and a half hours. We share a lot of life. It's deeply bonding to do something hard with other people. And I know those people very well by the end of one long hike, or even if it's an 8 or 10 mile hike. We're spending a lot of time together, and that can be a great on-ramp for something that you enjoy. You find a shared group, people who share your interests in life, and that's a natural way to start to share life together. So, yes, you can go find a hiking group off Facebook, and it might be really shallow because those are people who are not going the same direction in life. But if you can find people who share your hobbies inside of the church, it's like double powerful.
Yeah. Okay, Di, I want to steel man this a little bit, though.
Okay, do.
At the same point that you feel that you didn't do that slide justice, let's play out this real life scenario. You join a hiking group, okay? Hiking
in a church or not?
Not in a church. Okay. First of all, you're going out in the woods with some complete stranger that you don't know. I might feel comfortable doing that. I don't know. Probably be okay. My wife, or if my daughter told me, hey, I met some people online, we're going to go hiking in the woods. Like, even at 25, I'd be like, no, you aren't. Right? Like I'll follow you guys in my car. I'll find a way to drive my car on that path. I just think that the logistics around it are actually like pretty hard to do, especially if you aren't an extrovert. Like if you're an introvert, I just don't see that scenario
I
panning
mean,
out.
you can
I
put
see
that
it.
disclaimer on anything if you're an introvert or an extrovert. So for me, that's neither here nor there because that's just an example. It could be crocheting and you're sitting around couches and you're talking about your life. I mean, it used to be for years people scrapbook together. I because when you're hiking, you're not face to face with each other. That can get the bad rap that you're not like deeply looking into each other's eyes and sharing life. But there's something about like walking side by side with people where you can just be simply talking about the hard things in life and you've found someone who will put their shoulder under that burden with you. I think I think connection can happen in lots of spaces, but if there's a commonality of faith, I think it's way more powerful.
Well, I want to say I think it's where I'm going with this is I think it's easier to have relationships when there is already a
Yeah,
common and then you
yeah,
explore those interests within
yeah,
that.
yeah,
What I think it looks like in an ex-Mormon space, I don't want to
yep,
circle the drain too much on this. What it looks like in an ex-Mormon space is, yeah, I find community in a Facebook group and I might post on there but it's not actual connection with people,
agree,
which I don't think is healthy.
agree.
It's like, yeah, I could do this. I could go in a biking group. I could go in a hiking group. I could go start my own. I could do that. I could have a secular homeschool group, but it doesn't really work. Like, right? Like in theory, that's great,
Mhm.
but there is no lead in to establish those relationships. And so I feel that ex Mormons are lonely and I
Yeah,
feel that they are alone. And where they may turn to for relationship is probably nowhere. It's probably sitting on Facebook. It's probably watching the Monday night football game by themselves or with
mhm.
some high school buddies or whatever. But it's not really relationship and it's
Th
not really
those are
community
the
in
people
practice.
those are the people who that's the type of person who feels like they're surrounded by people and totally alone because they probably have coworkers and extended family and neighbors, but nobody really knows them, especially if you've known depth of relationship previously in a faith-based way in the Mormon church. There's something so much greater significance to those relationships that have purpose and let's help each other kind of a base that everything else would feel shallow, I would imagine, or
Yeah.
empty.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point to kind of circle back to what are you coming from? Right? You're coming from a really tight knit community to I don't have anybody. I might have a
Yeah.
few coworkers, I might have a few people here and there, but I don't really have this common bond with
Yeah.
people. I've found a ton of great relationships, ton of healing, tons of community for my family, for myself and my kids within the church. I think it's a beautiful place for people to go to have those
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
And Di, I honestly feel that church is just leadership creating the right environment for things to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
People have to take the opportunities because we can only create them and, point people but then yeah, every person has to take the initiative to step into something risky and see if they can find their people, which I know our listeners are from all over the place, but if you do live in Snohomish County in Washington State, you are invited to come to Venture. And if Venture is not a good fit for you, I will recommend something nearby that I think might be a good fit for you.
Perfect. On that, we love you guys. I just wanted to share some of my fun experiences that I had with community and talk a little bit about community today. like, share, subscribe. I don't know. Do it.
Send your questions. Send all your
questions.
Send all your I need a church recommendation in Atlanta to Jesus for Mormons at gmail.com.
Sure.
We'll do our best to find a church in your area for you.
Yeah, we'll try to help you out. If you're on Kauai, hey, which is probably a small group. I'll try to help you out. Anyways, I think that community is really important. And we love you guys.